The service provides an opportunity to voice any of your texts, including articles, reports, separate chapters or entire book in a sequence, no more than 30,000 characters at a time. The name of the MP3 file is formed from the first 20 characters of the text. Save the generated MP3 file to your device for storing and future use offline. Please select language and voice. Adjustable speed, pitch and pauses between sentences and paragraphs. Replace this text with "Here," as John Miller had grown used to silence. After years of cannon fire, musket smoke, and the cries of men in battle, the Arizona desert was like a balm for his wounded soul. He had purchased a small plot of land near the rugged hills, building his cabin with his own hands. Days were simple now: plowing his field, mending fences, tending to a few cattle. The war was behind him, yet its ghosts often crept into his dreams. Every morning, he rose with the sun, grateful that in this unforgiving land he could at least find peace. It was on one of these scorching afternoons, while riding his horse home from town, that he noticed something unusual near a dried creek bed. At first, he thought it was nothing but a bundle of rags tangled in the dust. But as he drew closer, his sharp soldier's eyes caught the faint movement. A child. The boy was frail, no older than 8 or 9, his dark hair matted, his ribs pressing against his skin. The Arizona sun had nearly claimed him. John slid off his horse without hesitation. He knew what he was seeing: an Apache child, alone and starving. Tensions between settlers and Apache tribes had always run high. Some would say bringing the boy home was a dangerous mistake. But as John knelt, seeing the cracked lips and sunken cheeks, he felt a deeper call within him. War had hardened his body but not his heart. With gentle hands, he lifted the child, offered water from his canteen, and whispered, "Easy, son, a broken bar, you're safe now." The boy drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. His eyes flickered open for a moment, dark and full of fear, before exhaustion claimed him again. John wrapped him in a blanket from his saddlebag and placed him on the horse. The long ride back to the cabin was quiet, save for the soft creak of leather and the pounding of hooves. John's mind raced with questions. Where were the boy's people? Was this some kind of trap, or had fate placed this life in his hands for a reason? When they reached the cabin, John laid the boy carefully on his bed. He stoked the fire and set a pot to boil. He had literally some beans, a piece of salted pork, a handful of cornmeal, but he made it into a simple stew. The smell filled the small room as the sun dipped behind the hills. John dipped a spoon into the broth and held it to the child's lips. At first, there was no response. Then, slowly, the boy tasted it. One spoonful turned into another, until he was eating hungrily, as though each bite pulled him further away from death. John sat by the bedside, watching. It struck him how vulnerable the boy was, how unfairly harsh the world had been to someone so young. His face was smudged with dirt, but his features were striking, with high cheekbones and wide, searching eyes that spoke of a proud people. John didn't know what tomorrow would bring: perhaps angry Apache warriors at his door, or suspicion from nearby settlers if word spread. But in that quiet cabin, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the boy breathing steadily again. As the child ate, John noticed the tremble in his small hands. He remembered his own trembling once, back when the war ended. Hunger and fear were cousins, each gnawing at the spirit until a man forgot who he was. The boy finished the stew, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and looked at John for the first time. Those eyes were wary but alive. It was enough to stir something in John he hadn't felt in years: a sense of purpose beyond survival. Night fell heavy across the desert. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries echoing off the hills. John sat on the porch, rifle leaning against the wall, keeping watch as he had done countless nights in army camps. Behind him, the boy slept deeply, wrapped in a quilt too large for his small frame. The stars above stretched endless, cold and brilliant. John thought of the boy's family, wondering if they searched even now, or if tragedy had already torn them away. He knew too well the pain of loss. Perhaps that was why he couldn't leave the child to die. The following morning, John was startled by the sound of coughing inside. He rushed in to find the boy awake, struggling to sit up. Job helped him drink more water and offered bread. The child chewed slowly this time, his eyes darting around the cabin. memorizing every detail. John spoke gently, though he wasn't sure if the boy understood English. "You'll be all right, son. You're safe here." He repeated the words, hoping tone would bridge what language might not. The boy said nothing, but the tightness in his shoulders eased a little. As the days passed, the boy grew stronger. John gave him chorus of fetching water, stacking wood, feeding the chickens. The boy watched carefully before following instructions, mimicking John's motions until he succeeded. There was pride in his eyes when he managed, as if proving he was not helpless. John admired his resilience. He himself had been broken by war before finding the will to rebuild his life. This boy had the same stubborn flame, refusing to let suffering win. It was a lesson John didn't expect to learn from a child. On the third evening, John noticed the boy humming softly while tending the fire. It wasn't a tune John recognized, but it carried a rhythm, a memory of something older than either of them. The sound reminded John that this boy wasn't just a stray life he had saved. He belonged to a people, a culture, a family. Saving him was only the beginning. Soon, the questions would come. Who would claim him? How would the Apache see John's actions, as kindness, or as theft? Yet, despite his worries, John felt a bond forming. He found himself watching the boy smile faintly when a chicken pecked at his boots, or when he discovered honey dripping from a wild comb John had hidden in the pantry. These small joys were proof that the boy was healing. And with each passing day, John's cabin no longer felt like a solitary refuge for one man, but a home touched by new life. Still, John was no fool. He kept his rifle within reach, scanning the horizon often. He knew Apache warriors could appear at any moment, demanding answers. He also knew the settlers in town would not look kindly on his choice to harbor an Apache child. But when he looked at the boy curled up near the fire, head resting on folded arms, John told himself that some risks were worth taking. Better to stand with conscience than hide behind fear. By the fourth day, the boy's cheeks had gained color, and his steps no longer wavered. He laughed on Sia. A quick, light sounded when John's horse sneezed dust all over him. That laugh stayed with John long after the boy fell asleep. It was proof that something fragile had survived hunger and loneliness. For John, who had seen too much death, it was a reminder that life still had victories worth holding onto. He didn't know what future awaited them both, but in those quiet days, a strange peace settled over his cabin. What John didn't know was that far beyond the hills, eyes were already watching, tracking, and waiting. The desert carried news in ways man could never understand. It through footprints, broken branches, the faintest trail of smoke. The boy's disappearance had not gone unnoticed, and those who cared for him had not given up hope. Job had saved one life, but that choice had set other lives into motion, drawing them slowly, step by step, toward his lonely cabin. 4 days later, as the sun bled orange across the Arizona horizon, John sat cleaning his rifle on the porch. The boy had grown stronger, even managing to laugh when chasing chickens that morning. But something in the air felt different that evening, a heavy, as though the desert itself held its breath. When John finally heard footsteps crunching over the dry earth, his body tensed. He rose slowly, gripping the rifle, and opened the cabin door. What he saw made his breath catch. 3 Apache women, standing silent and still in the fading light. The eldest woman stood at the front. Her hair was streaked with gray and tied in 2 long braids. Her face was lined by years of hardship and wisdom, but her eyes were sharp, watchful. Beside her were 2 younger women, their posture alert, their gazes fixed on John with the weight of generations behind them. They carried no weapons, but their silence spoke volumes. Behind them stood a boy, clutching the elder woman's hand tightly, his dark eyes flicking between John and his people. For a moment, none of them moved. The only sound was the rustle of dry leaves and the low moan of desert wind. John's throat tightened. He had seen battlefields where 2 sides faced each other in uneasy quiet, each unsure who would strike first. This moment felt the same. Charged, dangerous, yet fragile. His hand loosened on the rifle. He wasn't facing enemies, he was facing a family. The boy he had saved no longer looked lost but grounded, his small hand clinging to kin. John swallowed hard, searching for words. His voice came out steady, though his heart pounded. He was starving when I found him, John said quietly. "I gave him food, water, that's all." The woman did not respond immediately. The elder's gaze bore into him, unreadable, as if measuring his soul against the truth of his words. John resisted the urge to step back. He had faced generals and guns, but this silent scrutiny unsettled him more. The child tugged on the elder woman's hand and pointed at John. A stream of Apache words spilled from his lips, quick and earnest. Though John couldn't understand, the meaning was clear. Antonia, the boy, was defending him. The older woman's stern face softened slightly, though her eyes never left John. The younger women exchanged glances, their suspicion easing only a fraction. John felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps kindness still had a place, even in a land divided by blood and history. Still, the silence pressed heavy between them. John stepped aside, motioning toward the cabin. "He's welcome here. If you want to take him home, I won't stop you." The elder woman's eyes darted past him into the small room where the fire glowed warm. For a heartbeat, John imagined she saw more than just walls and obeyed as she saw her child's laughter rush toward within them. The boy, emboldened, tugged again and said something softer this time, looking from her to John with trust. Finally, the elder woman nodded once. She stepped forward, and John's chest tightened with both fear and relief. She placed a hand on the boy's shoulder, steadying him, then turned her eyes back to John. Her lips parted, and though her English was halting, the words carried weight. "You saved him." It was neither question nor accusation, it was truth spoken aloud. John inclined his head, humbled. "Any man would have," he replied, though he knew in this land, not every man would have. The younger women entered the cabin cautiously, their eyes scanning every corner. They seemed to test whether this place had been prison or refuge. When they saw the quilt tucked carefully around the boy's bed, the stew pot still on the stove, and the tools set neatly by the door, their suspicion eased further. The boy tugged free of the elder's grasp and ran to the table, picking up a small wooden carving Job had whittled for him a horse. He held it up proudly to show the women, smiling wide. The elder woman's eyes softened at the sight. She stepped closer to John, her face close enough now for him to see the weary lines etched deep into her skin. "Many would let him die," she said, her voice low. "But you did not." John felt the weight of her words settle on his chest. He wanted to explain that he had no choice, that after war, after so much loss, he could not bear to watch another life fade away. But the words tangled in his throat. Instead, he simply said, "He deserved a chance." For the first time, a flicker of respect passed across her expression. She gestured to the boy, who now leaned against the younger women, showing them the carved horse and mimicking gallops with his hands. In that moment, John saw something shift, a bridge, however fragile, forming between two worlds. He realized then that his act had not only saved the child, it had carried meaning far beyond his cabin walls. He had, without knowing, touched the lives of the family who now stood in his doorway. The desert grew darker as the sun sank fully behind the hills. Shadows stretched long, and the first stars pricked through the sky. John lit a lantern inside, and its glow spilled warmly into the night. The elder woman raised her hand slightly, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. It was not quite thanks, not quite farewell, but something between a recognition of shared humanity in a land where it was too often forgotten. John nodded in return, feeling the gravity of the moment. The boy hesitated at the threshold, torn between two worlds. He looked back at John, eyes wide, uncertain. John crouched to meet his gaze. "Go with them, son," he said softly. "They are your family." The boy blinked, then pressed the wooden horse into John's hand before running to join the women. The gift was small, but to John it felt like the weight of trust, of a bond that would not easily break. He closed his fingers around it, the carved edges sharp against his calloused skin. The women turned to leave, their silhouettes blending with the night. The elder glanced back once more, her eyes reflecting lantern light. No words were spoken, yet John understood. In that glance was gratitude, caution, and a silent promise. This act would not be forgotten. Then they disappeared into the desert, footsteps fading into the vast silence. John stood in the doorway long after they were gone, the wooden horse clutched tight in his hand, the air still heavy with what had passed. As the night deepened, John sat alone by the fire, the cabin suddenly feeling emptier than before. He replayed every moment of the child's laughter, the woman's eyes, the exchange of trust. For years, he had lived as if war had stripped him of purpose, but tonight he felt something stir within him. He had not fought for a cause or a nation this time. He had fought for life, for compassion, and in return, he had glimpsed the possibility of peace, however fragile, between two worlds. When John finally lay down to rest, the carved horse remained on the table beside his bed. Its shadow stretched across the cabin wall in the firelight, a reminder that his choice had changed more than one life. Beyond the hills, 3 Apache women guided a boy home. Inside the cabin, a soldier-turned-farmer closed his eyes, no longer haunted by ghosts of war, but steadied by the memory of a child he had saved. For the first time in years, he felt sleep come gently, without battle or fear.